Hi, so in this recording I will be doing a synastry reading, so I will be comparing the charts of two people and talking a little bit about how the energies between these two people potentially interact, or some of the potentials, some of the challenges maybe. This was something that was an order, so I will be sending a link to the person that I'm making it for, and also I will be putting it on my channel as a public video. So thank you for allowing me to do that. It might be interesting for someone. I haven't done a synastry reading, to be completely honest, in a while, but in terms of like an actual reading, but I have been looking at just synastry between people in general. Like, I always have the astrology in the back of my head in some way, so I'm always looking at whatever interests me in astrology at any given time. It could be like checking if I have something going on with synastry with somebody that I've had certain interactions with, or just someone in my life. So I'm always kind of doing that, but I haven't done a proper reading like this for a while. So it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but it's also quite exciting. The person that I'm making this for will be basically referred to as person one, and the other person will be person two, because I don't want to mention names or places of birth or anything like that in this video, because it will also be on my channel. So I'm just going to go straight into it and talk about some of the things that I see. Hopefully I touch on some interesting points that maybe you didn't think of, or just things that resonate with you. I'm not going to go through absolutely every aspect or everything going on in the houses or whatever. In fact, I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be talking that much about the houses. Also, there's different house systems, and one thing might resonate with you that maybe doesn't resonate as much with somebody else, and things like that. So, because there are different house systems and things, so but I've noticed a good few aspects that I would like to touch on at least, and we'll see how we go. So actually, the first thing that I noticed was that person one and person two have the suns opposite each other. So person one you have sun in Virgo, obviously. This other person has sun in Pisces, and you might think that there are people that might say sort of like, well, if you have suns opposite each other, like, that's not a good sign. You have completely different core selves. But I think from what I've heard a little bit about this other person from you and your interactions, just a little bit. I actually think that it's kind of apt, because I think it's relevant, because it shows that, like, you're interfacing with this person. There's definitely some sort of, I don't know the details, but there's definitely something that you're interfacing. You're kind of interfacing with this other person. You came together, your core selves, which are represented by the sun, sort of came together to have some sort of very impactful and meaningful interaction. So sun in Virgo opposite the other person's sun in Pisces, like, definitely some sort of interfacing in a core way. I think this is an important person in your life, and I think that you're important to the other person, because there's an important core interaction that you're doing, and maybe you're also learning a lot about, from what I've heard is true as well, that you're learning a lot about yourselves through each other. So your core selves are being impacted in a deep way, I think. And I think also, obviously, day-to-day communication is very important in a lot of interactions and relationships. So I found it interesting immediately that I saw, you have these conjunctions with Mercury. So person two's Mercury is conjunct your Saturn and your Mercury is conjunct the other person's Pluto. So I think there's definitely potential for a lot of very meaningful and maybe important, impactful communication. So again, you might have people who see, let's say, Mercury conjunct Saturn and assume that that's a terribly limiting placement, and I don't know all the details, but I would say that also it could also just mean maturity, and Mercury Saturn, it could mean maturity and learning through each other through your communication. And it's also a sign, Saturn's often a sign of like sustained interaction, like long-term interactions. So I think Mercury conjunct Saturn, like there's that binding element to that. There's that bond that can be created just from day-to-day interactions, day-to-day communicating. And then Mercury Pluto in the other way is honestly, I made a video years ago about Mercury square Pluto in the composite chart, I believe, or something like that. And it was like I talked in that video about how Mercury Pluto can definitely have an element of, let's say, one person trying to make somebody else see their point of view, and like it's this depth of communication, but in almost like a frictional way, if frictional is even a word, but you know what I mean. Like, so Mercury Pluto can be such depth of communication that it's actually harsh. It's actually, there's friction involved with it. So I've experienced relationships, interactions with people, friendships with people where I have a Mercury Pluto connection. And while it was definitely deep and like I learned a lot, and I'm sure they learned a lot, it's like there was also that element of like, well, we're often, let's say, arguing, we're often having some sort of debates that go to the core of who we are, almost. Like I was often challenging him and his worldview, and I didn't mean to, but it just kind of happened, and he did the same with me. So I don't know how this manifests really with you, but Mercury conjunct Saturn and then Mercury conjunct Pluto, like there's definitely something serious in terms of your communication with each other. Like it's not just frivolous. This connection is not just frivolous, and I would say that. Speaking of Mercury, I found it interesting as well that I have a personal example with this, if you don't mind. So your Mercuries are in a quincunx, I believe. Yes, so your Mercuries are in a quincunx aspect, also known as an inconjunction. I prefer to say quincunx because inconjunction sounds like a conjunction, which is not. So I have a personal example I have a friend who has his Mercury in a quincunx aspect with my Mercury, and we actually are often in a weird, kind of awkward, uncomfortable way, because I feel like the quincunx is kind of awkward and uncomfortable. So in a weird, uncomfortable, awkward way, we're often kind of speaking past each other, or we're kind of like, let's say I will say something and he's kind of looking away and he doesn't understand like what I mean, or because quincunx is kind of like they have nothing in common. The planets have nothing in common in terms of element or anything like that. So it's like I'm speaking of something that he doesn't register, or he's speaking of something that I don't register. So it creates this kind of awkward interactions, and we're friends, but we're maybe not super close friends, and so it has this element of like awkward interactions. I don't know how that manifests with you guys, but I think I just found that interesting that like two Mercuries quincunx each other. It just reminds me so much of like my friendship, and how it's like, we just speak past each other, and like we don't understand each other's references, especially when he says like a reference is some kind of movie or some sort of, some actor that I don't know, or just certain pop culture references or something. Like he speaks in his, like he does his mercurial thing and just speaks and, talks about these things, and I don't know anything about these things. It just goes over my head. And so when I talk about my interests, or just the way that I would speak, it doesn't land with him. Like it goes both ways. You see what I'm saying? So it's interesting having this kind of Mercury, quincunx Mercury, because it's like you need to work at what the quincunx really comes down to is acceptance, I think. So you need to work at, if you have this kind of synastry, quincunx with Mercuries, I think it's partly about accepting that you might have different communication styles or different ways of perceiving or talking about things. Like you might want to speak about different things or something like that, like with my friend. So it's just about accepting that and realizing that, there's more ways to connect as well, of course, that it's not just about communication on a day-to-day basis or intellectual communication. There's also other kinds of communication. And just accepting that, like, your worldviews or just your ways of perceiving or communicating and expressing are not necessarily, it's not that they're not compatible necessarily, but there might be this kind of funny awkwardness between, if you notice, maybe if you really look at it deeply. I don't know what their interactions are like, but like with me and my friend, it's very clear to me, and probably to him as well, that like there's like a mishmash, or like, that's probably not the saying. I mean, like there isn't a good match in terms of, like, we just speak past each other, and it's like in an awkward, funny way. It's like a clumsy aspect. It's not like it's that we have a lot of conflicts, but it's more like there is an awkwardness because the planets, like, it's like they have nothing in common with where they are in our charts. Like, so if they're in signs that are in quincunx, and they're degree-wise, they're very much in a quincunx, like, it's just like, it's kind of awkward. You need to kind of shift something. You need to accept maybe that you can't necessarily speak about something all the way and have it be received in a certain way all the way, and vice versa. So I would sometimes say something to my friend, and I would just have to accept that he doesn't understand everything about what I'm saying. And when he says something about, makes certain references or whatever, like speaks of films or actors that I don't know, or makes references that I don't understand, that, that's something that I don't receive fully. So there's like this awkwardness. It's not necessarily a tension. I'm smiling as I'm talking about this because it's just funny to me. Like, it's not a tension necessarily. It's not like a square, but it's just kind of awkwardness, if that makes any sense. Let's move on. So moving on to something quite different. Your Uranus and Neptune are in a sextile to person 2 Sun. So what resonates with me with that is that the way that you maybe express higher thinking, intuitive thinking, compassionate ideals, like all those kinds of worldly things of like other cultures, other realms, intuition, compassion, just sudden impulses that you have, ideas that you have suddenly. Uranus and Neptune are actually maybe inspiring to person 2, because person 2 has a core self that is in a harmonious relationship to those things of yours. So I think that's one of the reasons maybe that you were able to get along, is because, like, it's stimulating, right? Sextiles are often quite stimulating, and Uranus and Neptune, especially Uranus, like, they're quite stimulating planets. They're intuitive. They're, people are intrigued often by Uranian people or very Neptunian people. Like Neptunian people it might be hard to kind of put your finger on them. Like, who is that person? And Uranus is like, well, who is that person? Like, look at that eccentric person. Like, it's that kind of intrigue. And so the way that you express those things, maybe in your lifestyle, in your ideas, maybe some of the interests that you have, the way that you talk about things that are intuitive, perhaps astrology, very Uranian and also Neptunian. It's like those things are actually stimulating his ideas of like who he is. Like, that's his sun, right? His core self, and his sun is in Pisces. So he's already intuitive as well. And he's probably tapped into some kind of universal, like what do I call it? The collective unconscious. So, and with Mercury in Aquarius, the collective consciousness, he's definitely forward thinking that in some way. So he probably can tune in with you to those things. So I think maybe when you're, let's say, talking about astrology together, it's actually, it's stimulating for him. It's inspiring for him. I would say that. Let's see here. So, let me pause this for a second while I look. I will quickly mention there is, by orbs, it's a little bit on the longer end, in the wider end, I should say. But so your Venus is at 13 degrees Leo, and person two's Mars is at 4 degrees of Sagittarius. So, you could say there's a kind of a weaker, quote unquote, trine there. And then also your Mars in Libra is opposite person two's Venus in Aries. So, there is that compatibility in terms of what you find drives you in terms of relationships. There's certain compatibility, with, I think, attraction, or just how people interact with each other, and just socially, and like what drives you, what like turns you on, energetically or physically or emotionally, socially. It's there. It's just, they're not super strong aspects in terms of orb, but it's kind of there. And like I said, with the Uranus Neptune sextile sun, and the suns in opposition to each other, like there is definitely that element of like coming together to kind of inspire and uplift and open each other's minds, which reminds me that your Mercury is in an 8-degree conjunction with Jupiter. So it's, it's not super strong in terms of degrees. Your Mercury is in Virgo. Person two's Jupiter is in Libra. And your Jupiter is also in Libra. And then, okay, and his Mercury is in sorry, I'm actually going to pause it to have a better look. Okay, yeah, so I had a look, and what I was trying to get at is that, you have Mercury conjunct Jupiter on one side, and then on the other side you have Mercury trine Jupiter. So I think, what I would think right away is expansion of the mind by coming together. So you're maybe learning from each other, you're learning about life, you're learning about ideas, concepts, maybe theories, maybe astrology through each other. By you might be you might have stimulating conversations with each other, because Jupiter is all about expanding, it's all about learning, it's about the higher meaning, it's about beliefs. What do I make of the information that's presented to me? Mercury is just kind of the information, and the gathering and the processing, and it's very exciting for Mercury just to gather and process information, right? But then Jupiter puts meaning onto it. So philosophical conversations. I don't know why I said it like that, but that's just what comes to me, with a double whammy in that way of like Mercury, Jupiter. Just philosophical conversations, expanding the mind. I can almost guarantee in some way that, you know, you have grown from having conversations with person two, and person two has grown and expanded and opened up their mind and everything through having conversations with you. It goes both ways. And let me pause again to have a better look at some other things. There's actually some other things that are coming up for me in terms of the stimulating conversations and the stimulating energy of just being around each other. So if you look at your moon in Gemini is in a trine, it's quite a close trine with his Uranus in Libra. And then also, if we want to talk about a minor aspect briefly, your Uranus is, I don't even like calling them minor aspects, but you know what I mean. There is a quintile between your Uranus and his moon. So quintiles are incredibly stimulating. They're almost like quietly stimulating. It's like a magical, mysterious aspect. So mysterious that people often don't talk about them. So that, let's say, you're both emotionally stimulated in some way by having, by each other's Uranus. So what I would say is, if one person is, let's say, opening up a little bit about their emotions, I mean, you both have moon in the 12th house, it might be difficult to do that at times, but when you kind of are being your emotional selves, let's say, for lack of a better way of putting it, when you're being your emotional selves, the other person can actually, both of you, this goes both ways, when you're being your emotional selves, you're nurturing private selves, like in a way that the other person taps into, then you can both actually resonate with that in like a Uranian way. So that gives you gives the other person, interesting ideas, and like stimulates the person, like goes out of the box, if that makes any sense. I could word that so much better. I'm sorry. Like I say, I am a little bit out of practice doing this, but I'm seeing things in this chart that are interesting, and I'm just trying to like word it, acceptably. Like, let's say your moon, right? If you're being your moon self, your emotional self, you're maybe tapping into some of those moon qualities that you would have. Then person two might get very stimulated by that. There is a trine there between your moon and his Uranus. So, like, you're both. This goes both ways. So, like, you're both getting stimulated by each other's. But your Mercuries are also, like, your Mercury is it's an 8-degree out of sign conjunction with his Uranus, and there's nothing the other way. But there is that stimulation piece that I talked about with Uranus before, and it extends to like the emotional world. So I think you're both able to like tap into each other's like emotional selves and be stimulated by that, and find some kind of intriguing things from that, if that makes sense. So especially like the quintile, your Uranus quintile person two's moon, like, so person two might get emotionally invested or moved by some crazy, for lack of a better word of putting it, idea that you have. If you start acting Uranian and you express a Uranian idea or thought, there is that quintile to his moon. So it's like there's something electric about that for him, because quintiles are quite electric. They're quite like creative, imaginative. It is like almost like a Uranian aspect in itself, a quintile. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Pluto, everybody's favorite topic in astrology. Your Pluto is in a trine with his Sun. It's not super strong in terms of the degrees. I mean, I don't even want to say strong, but there is like a, you know, there's a little bit of a difference orb-wise, but I would say it's there. Yeah, it's there. And then the other way, his Pluto in Virgo is also like 8 degrees away, but I would say, you could say it's there to your Sun. So you have that Sun-Pluto connection in both ways. And it's not super tight. They're not exact aspects or anything, but again, that depth and that, that you came together on some level to have deep experiences and to interface with each other, like the Sun's opposite, interface with each other in order to learn something deeper about life and yourselves. And his Pluto is also actually very tightly conjunct your Mercury. So, I mean, did I talk about that already? I mean, I think I did. Yeah, like Mercury Pluto in general can be kind of an aspect where it's like, okay, the people are trying to force something on the other person, like intellectually or in conversation, but it's not always like that. It's just that there is a depth. There's some way that the Pluto will seek into the conversation, will seek itself into the conversation, if that makes sense. So, like, you might be just talking about something and there's a sense that one of the people is trying to, let's say, steer the conversation. It can be very subtle sometimes. I've had this with my Mercury-Pluto contacts. Like, one person may try to sort of steer the conversation a certain way for it to get deeper, for it to get to where they want it to go. So sometimes it is just about, well, do I want to talk about this? Do I feel comfortable with this? What way do I approach this? And I think with your Mars in Libra, I find that very interesting position in general, just kind of as a side note, Mars in Libra, because my experiences with Mars in Libra often is that like there is kind of the match between Mars and Libra, they're so different, right? Does that make sense? So Mars just wants to express itself in terms of its energy. It wants to be direct. Libra wants harmony. Libra wants social graces, social harmony. So Mars and Libra can actually act in ways where they're not being necessarily, this can be subtle, but sometimes they're not being necessarily direct about what they would like to express in a more direct way, if that makes sense. So their Mars is experiencing something very direct and they want to express that, but their Libra is trying to soften the blow a little bit. But I think with the Pluto Mercury contacts, it might happen that like you need to, like, both of you, like, you sometimes it's important to like kind of understand like do I feel comfortable with this? Like does the other person feel comfortable with this? Like whichever one is trying to steer the conversation a certain way, it's like there is a psychological reason why that is happening. So they're trying to get to something, like some kind of nuance or depth. I've had this with my Mercury-Pluto contacts, is uncanny. Like one person is trying to get the other person to see something or talk about something, and you don't know what the other person is thinking or feeling in that moment. So like sometimes it is about being direct and saying, listen, I don't feel comfortable talking about this right now, or is it okay if we talk about this right now? or would you like to talk about this right now, or hey, I want to talk about something, is that okay? And things like that. It's just also just general communication tips, I guess, in relationships. I think a lot of us could do with better understanding of how to be in a relationship, or how to be in interactions with people, and take the other person into account, but also not lose yourself. Yeah. And of course, I've just noticed that your Pluto is square person two's Mercury. So you actually do have a very strong Pluto-Mercury thing going on, because your Mercury is tightly conjunct person two's Pluto, and person two's Mercury is very tightly square your Pluto. So those themes that I've just talked about might be something that you might relate to or not, but there might be a theme in this interaction or this connection where, yes, somebody is trying to steer the conversation a certain way, and it can be subtle, especially with some of the Mars in Libra, and you both have Jupiter in Libra. So you might try to not do it very directly at times, but I mean, I know we spoke about how you appreciate directness and you are direct. But I would say that there are people that are just super direct, like even more direct, and then there are people that should be more direct for the sake of everybody else. So it's just about finding that balance, which is a very Libra word, of like, well, like I said, like, just if you want to talk about something, to find the right circumstance or the right environment to talk about it, so that both people can have their say, and not try to like push an idea down each other's throats or not try to, let's say, steer the conversation in a certain way that is maybe too fierce in some way. So there's actually quite a bit more that I could say, I think, but I do want to touch on at least one more thing right now, which is this is a little bit more subtle maybe, but I noticed that your Chiron is quincunx both person two's Chiron and person two's North Node. So, I mean, ultimately, I think when two Chirons are quincunx, so person two has Chiron in Aries, you have Chiron in Virgo. So, like, the way that you are each trying to nurture your wounds, let's say your emotional pain from the past, it has nothing in common with each other. So you might find that you're trying to do it one way, and person two is actually trying to use methods that either use different methods or use the same method in a completely different way. You have different understandings of how to nurture that wound, that Chiron wound, and it is a wound. I have a very personal experience with Chiron and how I understand Chiron and my own Chiron in my chart. Like Chiron in Aries, that person two has, I would say, can have a problem with maybe that they weren't allowed to express anger, or they expressed anger too much, or they weren't allowed to express who they were, or they expressed themselves in such a way that it came across too much for people. It can go either way. There can be an anger problem, there can be a repressed anger problem. Chiron in Virgo that you have is more about a wound related to maybe am I doing enough? Am I taking care of my responsibilities in the daily life enough? am I being, it's more of a thinking, like wound, whereas Aries would be more, in a way, it's almost like more of an impulsive, instinctual, emotional wound. Chiron in Virgo could be someone who literally just overthinks a lot, and that's your wound. So you're working on different areas when it comes to your Chiron. So does that make sense? So I could say that so much better. Like, person 2 might just be working on literally just how to control anger better, or how to express their own self better, and how to be better when it comes to like expressing their impulses or who they are, let's say. Your Chiron is that you're working more on, like, you're sensitive when it comes to maybe health, maybe daily life, when it comes to practical tasks that you have to do. Am I of service enough? Am I doing this practically enough? Am I contributing in a practical way enough with what I do? Your Sun is also in Virgo. Your Mercury is also in Virgo. So you have that, you're tapping into those themes quite naturally, I would say. Just trying to be of service, trying to be useful, trying to make sure that things are, that they make sense. Things have to make sense for a lot of Virgo positions. But with his Chiron, his main focus when it comes to healing might simply be that he's trying to like understand how to express anger better, or how to express his identity better. And I don't know how far along he is with that, or where is that with that. But I just think that the Chirons being in conjunct, or like quincunx like that, is quite interesting and significant. And then also, your Chiron is also quincunx person 2's North Node. Because person 2 actually has North Node tightly conjunct Chiron. So I think there's just there's like a what's the word? Like a mismatch. Yeah, like a mismatch between how you're trying to heal your wound, let's say, and how he is trying to heal his wound, which is very different. And then also where he's trying to go in life. So, like, the way that you're healing and the way that you're attempting to heal those wounds, that are those pain points, they're kind of not relating to the way that he's doing that, and also to where he wants to go in life. Maybe your Chiron, the way that you're expressing wounds, the way that you're trying to heal, doesn't match up with where his life path is by the end of his life. Like what his path is. That's like his North Node. There's no connection there. Like I talked about the quincunx between Mercuries before. It's kind of awkward. There's an awkwardness. There isn't much. You don't have much. Those planets or points don't have much to do with each other. It's like you just have to accept. Two people at a party have to accept that the other is there, even though they have nothing in common. They don't really have much to talk about, but they still have to be civil. They still have to like acknowledge each other's existence. So it's like where person 2 is trying to go on a soul level doesn't have anything to do with where you're trying to heal. So and you're healing your Chirons are also in a quincunx. So it's almost like you have different paths when it comes to what you're trying to heal and how you're healing. Does that make any sense? I'm probably wording it not great, but like I think ultimately where he is going doesn't have anything to do with the way that you're trying to heal. So maybe his path is not something that converges, let's say, well with your healing nature, like where what you're trying to heal doesn't go up, doesn't match where he's going in life. Those have nothing to do with each other. So his path is one way, but you're trying to heal a different way. So his path may have nothing to do with the way that you're trying to heal. If that makes sense. Maybe that resonates with you in some way. I'm not sure. I think there's probably a lot more that I could say, but I'm going to leave it at that. And I would appreciate it if you let me know if like you'd ever want me to clarify anything about this reading, because it was a little bit difficult to express myself a little bit sometimes. It's my Mercury squares, I guess. But like there's a lot that I see here, but I just there's a lot more probably that I could have said. And so if you do want clarification, just let me know. And if you want me to do like a part 2 of this, we can sort that out. And thank you again for letting me put it on my channel. If you are happy with it, I would appreciate kind of, even if anybody that you know might be interested in me reading for them or something, like that would actually be really interesting as well, to kind of, because I'm trying to expand my knowledge for one thing, and my tapping into my insight and my communication. I'm just working on myself just like everybody else in a way. So I would like to expand my interest in this and what I'm doing in it. So if you know anybody that might want a reading, just let me know as well, or have them contact me or whatever. If anybody listening to this enjoyed this, do leave a like and subscribe if you want more from me. And if you'd like a reading of your own, you can always email me at mattothinks@gmail.com. I can do this kind of synastry reading. I can do composite readings. I probably prefer synastry over composite, to be honest, when it comes to doing readings, but I can do both. I can do natal readings and transit readings. I'm so sorry if I missed out on important bits in this. Like, I didn't talk much about houses, or I focused on the aspects because that's kind of where my mind goes to with this. But let's see, like I'm a bit wary of how to interpret the houses in here, with this synastry, because if there's certain, like I use one house system, you maybe use another house system most of the time, and it's just I don't want to say something that goes completely off the mark either. But I really hope you got something out of this, and that it gives you some food for thought, if anything, and just something for you to reflect on, if anything. So thank you very much, person 1, and talk to you soon. Bye.